Hello.
Hi, David.
How's it going?
Good, thank you.
I can get my, here we go. Perfect.
Hi, Cindy. Your eyes are closed. Cindy's eyes are closed. Hi. Hi, Amy. So we're waiting on one other person. David, have we met? Did we ever meet in person at like Renegade Craft Fair 100 years ago?
Yeah, it's 5 or 6 years ago. I think briefly
Yeah.
somewhere in downtown LA. Yeah.
Okay, great. I didn't know if that was you or your business partner.
Yeah, I was there. I
Yeah.
was at through all those events. So we're not doing craft fairs anymore, but it was a great interesting
Yeah.
start to the business.
Yes, that's a good moment when you graduate from hustling yourself to set up a booth.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I remember the first few years of Rewilder being like, Lisa, one of my goals, like I know we'll get there, but one of my goals is to not be doing this booth myself.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Yeah, of course, everything's changing now. We're waiting on, let's see, Aparna just emailed me, unfortunately, to say that she couldn't come. So we're just waiting on Stacy. And let me text her quickly to see if she'll be here. Hmm. Let's give her one more minute if you guys don't mind, so we
Yep.
can start
Yeah,
together.
that's good.
Thank you.
Cindy, I noticed you had a background from the EPA. What do you think about the decision or the rollbacks related to the regulations?
Disheartening for the last 3 years almost. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
just the one, it's continuous rollback. And I think I touched any of this, but I think when this administration first came on board, they had a plan that by 2018 they would dismantle the agency.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, on paper, that never
Yeah.
happened because you can't. It's too hard to dismantle any agencies, whether you want to or not. What they have been doing is systematically just kind of I think cut it into little pieces. Lots of ones to leave.
Yeah.
I mean, just people either retire or leave their stuff, they go to other Fed agencies. So it's just, which on one hand, it's disheartening because it means the agency is kind of left as a shell. Having said that, though, I do feel like the agency needs to kind of reinvent itself because we kind of achieved our original mission. We want to clean up and set laws and rules, and we haven't addressed the biggest problem that Jenny and I talk often, which is, non-point source pollution, which is pollution that is not out of a pipe or we can track. That's linked to a lot of just everyday habits and behavior. So how does a Fed agency address that?
Yep. No, it's interesting.
So, yeah. So,
Man, it's a lot, right? All right, well, Stacy's on her way, so I think we can get started and do introductions. And first of all, thank you. I really appreciate this, and we're keeping it to kind of small groups like this because it's been more manageable and everybody gets to actually like dive deep into conversation. And you know, in my whole life and work, it's always been collaboration that leads to innovation. So I really appreciate just the opportunity to sort of gather and have community and connect everybody. One of the things, this is the second call. So one of the things that came at the end of the first call, which was sort of like an immediate revelation, or not even, I mean, nothing extraordinary, but just like the connection of all these people together is already a very powerful thing. So if you guys are open to it, I'd love to just connect everybody on that list, or at least on this call, so that you can, you know, be in contact with each other. I admire you guys both a lot, and obviously Stacy too when she joins. So I think, you know, you're doing amazing things already. So thank you again just for sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate it. So I wanted to just do quick introductions. David, since we're sort of re-meeting, I think I'll introduce myself again. So I'm Jenny. I have 3 kids. I live in LA. I started Rewilder almost 6 years ago now, basically with the intent to divert as much non-recyclable material from landfill as possible. I mean, my background's in architecture and materials, so I was teaching at Art Center and came across this incredible polypropylene filter cloth that was not recyclable from Miller Coors, and they were throwing away 2 tons of it every 3 days. So it was the kind of thing where all of a sudden I realized, damn, like that's a lot of material going into the earth. And by the way, it's beautiful and it's high performance and it lasts a long time and it's already sort of ready to use. So that was about 6 years ago that I made the shift to doing this full time. And now, honestly, Stephanie will introduce herself as well, but Stephanie and I also works at Rewilder, and we've been talking a lot about how our business is changing now in response to all of this. So I don't know what Rewilder will be in the future, but that's the introduction and the past of it. So if you guys don't mind doing quick introductions. And hi, Stacy. Thank you for joining us. David, you want to start?
Sure, yeah. So I guess similar background. We started in 2013 just looking at plastic pollution in the ocean. I joined a couple of friends, started playing around with ideas to capture streams of plastic waste. We landed on fishing nets. We got started from a grant from the Chilean government. And at first we were designing and manufacturing our own products from nets. We're still doing that in a small component of our business, but on a bigger component now, we're working on B2B solutions to connect waste to new product development. So kind of large scale. The scales of our program now is hundreds of tons. We started at like 5 and 10 tons. So we're more, in the last 12 months, we did about 600 tons, 600 metric tons of material. And I'd say kind of going forward, we definitely are still focused on actually connecting end of life plastic waste with new applications. But personally, I've been much more interested in looking at the whole life cycle of plastic and the detrimental impacts to the society. So we're kind of gearing up to be a much more advocate of non-extractive materials. So looking at the real full life cycle impact of companies using new plastic. And I think that if I can pinpoint the biggest shift in the thinking there, it was probably that our biggest concern was plastic in the ocean, but we're realizing that just the production of new plastics in general is a bigger impact to the environment, both from an emissions standpoint and from a human health standpoint. Is that everyone can agree it's pretty shitty to have plastic floating around the ocean, but it's even shittier to have petrochemical companies producing plastic and marginalizing communities and really impacting the way we live. And so we're kind of in this weird balance where at a core, we collect and effectively help recycle material, but we're also interested in getting more involved in the bigger discussion about bringing awareness to the harmful impacts of plastic on our environment in general.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
Cindy?
So I, like you guys, had a shift about 2.5 years ago. I'm an environmental scientist and engineer by training. I worked at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for 19 years since I was a graduate, like a student. And I had gone through the whole different cycles of regulatory work, policy development, scientific research. I always had a component of working with the public, you know, whether it's at local level or state level or national level or even international level. And probably towards the end of the Obama administration, I realized that our agency wasn't making a connection with people, and we weren't really doing the things that we have set out to do, our overall mission. And I think for me, I just felt really, I don't know, disgruntled. So I started really thinking about what it is that's missing from the gap. And just real quickly, I basically decided to step out and started my own kind of like a social good tech company. And what we try to do in our company is two things, is to connect people to better impacts in a very consumer friendly way, where we're linking people to information or lifestyle shifts, and or to companies that are adopting sustainable practices or giving back. And then at the core of all of that, what we try to do is connecting people to better data or businesses to better data, and really using data analytics in a more meaningful way. EPA, among a couple of other Fed agencies, probably collect and monitor and assess the most out of any entity organization in the world. And yet we haven't used it in any way, I think, that's meaningful for an average, I think, public citizen. So what I wanted to do is track the impacts that we've made. And I have selected, because it's easy for consumers to understand purchase power. So that's where we started with. And on the back end, we try to track those positive impacts or different activities or impacts, and linking it to either environmental data, water quality data. One of the things we're currently doing is linking it to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, so we can track what all these different positive things are doing. The vision for me is to try to get to quantify the impact as best as we can. So like David, and actually even Jenny does this, which is your guys are trying to either create products or identify what those better products are, what you're diverting. And so for us, it's kind of those kind of information in a more, I think, combined way, so we can look at what does that mean in terms of, you know, reducing air quality impacts? What does it mean in terms of reducing water quality impacts on the ground? If we divert 1,000 tons of trash from the landfill, does that mean we actually improve quality by a certain amount? And so for us, that's the core, and that's, yeah, probably good for now.
Thank you. Stacey, you want to do a quick intro?
I don't know. Well, it sounds like people are kind of giving their background in passion. Sorry, I'm late. One of my directors and I finally connected, and I told her I had stuff to do, and well, the conversation ends when they end, right? So I work for LA Metro Transit Authority. I'm in the environmental department. And I've been working with a passion around clean water for about 30 years. Started as a classroom teacher, working K-12, and then became a teacher of teachers at the professorial level. Decided to finally go and get a degree in science because I was teaching science. When I was at LMU, Rewilder Marymount University here in Los Angeles, did my master's research on microplastics, where I connected with the EPA about their methodology to extract plastics from sand. We found some ways to improve upon that methodology, and so that was a great project, and added to the community in that way. As a diver and as an avid sailor, I'm in the water a lot. Although right now I'm not.
Wait, actually
I'm surrounded by water.
Actually, you are, aren't you?
I'm underwater, technically. Water line's about here. Yes, I'm in a sailboat. And then And so a lot of my work has been around plastics and microplastics. I have worked for some of those chemical companies that that you love to hate, and worked very hard to help them expand and deepen their commitments to sustainability. And that's been very exciting to see changes there. And I'm doing the same at Metro. So I've started a number of programs there, and through that met Jenny, and we just piloted a fun endeavor, and so there's a lot of possibilities and a lot of excitement that's on the horizon, kind of in and around that space. So I'm very heavily involved in construction right now, heavily involved in, as a result, waste diversion and waste management, I guess I should say. I oversee all of the HAS and non-HAS waste for capital projects at Metro. No small feat. And through sustainability, we try to divert. We're trying to move from 75% diversion rate to a 90% diversion rate over the next 10 years. So lots going on.
Thanks, Stacey. Steph?
Hi, guys. So my background is in advertising and marketing, and it's a weird time for this industry and this line of work right now, just because I think that our entire society has been built on selling everyone stuff, right? And I'm sure we've all been consumers ourselves. We're trying to sell things ourselves, and I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of, like, my personal goal now with Rewilder is to like figure out how to align like what we want for the future with like what we can offer. And it's really conflicting for me because on the other side of me, where I work at an ad agency, and it's like I'm selling those same things. And it's very like there's a tension going on right now that is kind of confusing me. So I don't know. I really want to get something out of this call and just really like think about what the future looks like for like consumption and like the stuff that we're going to buy and sell, and what it means to people, like what it means to us as consumers and what it means to us as change makers. So that wasn't really a background thing, but that was just on my mind as I was like listening to everyone talk. So
That's perfect, perfect. And then I also want to introduce Imogen, who you can see but not hear. She is also working for us, and she's taking notes, and we'll just sort of summarize this call so it's easy to put out into the world. Thank you, Imogen. Well, awesome. I mean, again, you're all amazing, and so I think I'd like to just take a moment to just recognize that we're in a massive crisis. And it's devastating for a lot of people. So I think I'm personally feeling, I know Stephanie and I have talked about that this is just a really emotional moment. It's hard to be positive. It's hard to be positive right now, but at the same time, it's so clear that business as usual is not sustainable. Not even that word is sustainable. That's something that came out of the last call, is that the word sustainable is not even sustainable. So and that also things are changing so rapidly that there's all this opportunity for change in a way that just I've never seen before. I think 2 years ago, if you had asked me, you know, is Rewilder really making an impact? And David, I love what you're talking about with B2B, because we've been moving in that direction too, where you start to say, okay, this is our measurable impact of selling consumer goods to people. And the measurable impact of dealing with large corporations is way bigger than that. But people in general are just changing much, much faster by necessity than I've ever seen. And so I was saying 2 years ago, if you'd asked me, is Rewilder making a measurable difference? I struggled with that all the time. Like, what am I doing? Why am I pouring my heart into this when it feels so insurmountable? And all of a sudden now you see like things that were illegal a month ago, like doctors having FaceTime conversations with their patients. All of a sudden those laws are changing like so fast in response to this whole pandemic, and it makes me think that there's just opportunity for change. So I mean, my hope is that this time is a window of opportunity for like really holistic and sustainable change, but that's such a huge thing. And I know we're all working on that, right? Like everybody, all of you are already working on that at that level, but it's a lot. That's a lot to think about. So I think just to start simply, I would ask, why did you say yes to this call? Like what made you say yes to doing this?
Because you asked.
That's it. Oh wait, Cindy, you're muted. You're muted.
Thanks. I would say for me, Jenny, first of all, thank you for inviting me and creating this opportunity. I think for me, it's because, you know, as you're at home and it's like all of us are trying to get at this problem that Stephanie mentioned, which is it's this buying and selling, and we're trying to look for different solutions to address this problem. Some people think it's, you know, circular economy, and although that's been around for a long time, like why is it not, you know, working in a bigger way? And I think for me, the reason is because I see an opportunity for bigger change, which is what you're thinking about. It's an opportunity for all of us to shift. And as we're all trying to work on a little bit of things, I say yes because I feel like we need to connect with people who want to do the same thing, so we can kind of put all of our energy together in a more concerted effort, instead of we're all working towards it, but it's more useful if it's like everybody going at it the same way and making a more, I think, bigger impact. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from my perspective, getting everyone's individual perspectives on the world and certainly the current crisis is of interest to me and what people are seeing. I mean, personally, you know, it's like a giant experiment that we would never want to conduct, especially on an environmental basis. I mean, kind of testing what's happening when we don't transit as much, we stop flying everywhere, there's less consumerism everywhere, and I think that unfortunately we're all going to feel a lot of pain from those impacts directly and indirectly. I'm not very optimistic that it's going to be a short period of time. I think it's going to be a longer period of time. But the positives from that, I think that you highlighted, even just the medical care changes, is that we're going to have to drastically change, and that I really do think the world's going to look differently when we do get back to that sense of normalcy. And I think it's you know, taking the call is like staying productive and thinking about ways and brainstorming about ways that we can use this downtime to kind of reconstruct and reimagine what the world will look like. I know from our end, some of our physical operations have had to stop. Certainly anyone operating a recycling program, transport is a key component, both of workforce and material. And that for us is a huge hardship right now. And so we've shifted a lot of attention into looking at the system that the waste that we're evaluating is working in, and how we can either design or implement a better system so that not just the waste that we come across in the individual communities we work in, but maybe globally a system can be developed to help track and keep track of this waste. So yeah, I guess trying to stay productive and make use of the downtime while we're all kind of isolated at the time being.
Yeah, I mean, oh, go ahead, Stacey.
Yeah, just a couple things I wanted to bounce off of with that. One, downtime. What downtime?
just downtime from a not from a productivity standpoint, but from a not being able to travel. At least for us, we work in programs in South America and Asia, so downtime being we can't actually travel to those physical locations, but it's more remote work and making sure that things are moving ahead, even though certain areas we won't be able to physically address.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it is kind of a weird space to be in, where being in construction, and construction is moving full steam ahead. You know, it's incredibly busy, and there's like this weird ramp, you know, things that we weren't allowed to do before, now we're being encouraged to do. But there's a lot of thinking going on around waste and how to reduce waste. There's going to be a blog coming out any day now through US Green Building Council LA chapter. I'll make sure that Jenny gets a link to it when it posts on circularity economy. I just finished editing it last night. I curate that blog. So called Snapshots on Sustainability. So that's one space to get the word out. But also, I'm kind of curious about how to reach out to industry when you don't know who they are and where they are, right? I was really encouraged. What was it, last week when General Motors reached out to their supply chain and said, who can retool to make parts for ventilators? Because we're not making cars right now. And how literally within a week, you know, things were retooled and they're happening and at a speed that we hadn't seen before. And I emailed Jenny this earlier today. I recently heard, I think last night, that UCLA is got a proposal out for anyone who can make non-surgical masks.
I reached out to them actually, Stacey, after your email, but we're already at, like, my team is working at maximum capacity, and literally I can't make enough of them.
But how awesome is that, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of amazing where that idea of being nimble, and do people choose to expand, and if so, how? And what it's telling me, at least, is there's a lot of opportunity that's been left sitting on the table, just waiting for someone to pick it up.
Yeah.
And I know it's something that I'm really curious about, like, how do you even find those kinds of partners when you don't know where to look? And I think that there's been this amazing outreach effort through education for people to be concerned about the problem, but now how do we elevate it to the next level? You know, creative solutions that aren't just telling people that what they're doing is bad, but instead finding ways to help them change their culture and their thinking about what should be part of my life cycle analysis, etc.
Yeah. So for me, Stacey, I think you really hit on the nose, which is, it seems like we're so good about talking what the problem is. And I always say this is what we did excellent at EPA, is we made you worry with all the information we had. But we never really showed people what solutions are. The only thing people really think about, they meet anybody from EPA. And by the way, side note, I did know about your microplastic work through an ex-colleague. As you're talking about it, because it's in the LA areas, and I have worked in LA, so it's just funny I was thinking about it. But I think that's the thing, is we never provided solutions for people. And if anybody ever thought about environment, they think tree huggers, they think recycling. And they're like, well, I recycle. And then people would ask me, like, is that good enough? And I'm always like, no, it's not good enough. There's much more you can do. And I think it's exactly that. Like, what are the solutions we can give to everybody around us? There's the education component for sure, that people have to get on board and understand, so that they will then make that personal shift. For me, I feel like the missing gap has always been that the environment is a third party, that it's something that's good for the environment, but not good for me. And I'm hoping what arises among this, what's horribly happening, is this a better awareness that, oh, it actually affects me directly. Oh, because air quality now has improved, that you can see that direct connection between your activity on the ground, driving less, carpooling, or whatever, all of us staying home, that you can now realize that the environment is not a third party, but it's something I can work on.
I feel like that's kind of a big communications, like, mission thing, right? Like, that's in advertising, in marketing, our whole purpose is to figure out how to make some useless product resonate with consumers. And we're always thinking in those terms, like, but what does it make them feel? How do we connect this product to this person? And like, we spend there's so much money in getting people to buy, that I think that if advertising and marketing were to actually be centered on purpose-driven topics like this. It's like, I've read those recycling like reports, and like, have you guys ever seen, I actually was a science major and I worked in a molecular biology lab, and like the things that they would churn out were like, why does this matter to anyone? But like, they're trying to solve cancer, like cure cancer here, and it should matter to people. So I almost think there's this huge comms gap that needs to be bridged between like the average general consumer to the topics that matter. And I think that this sort of pandemic is really exposing what was wrong with having leading consumers to trust in brands and products instead of science and like the environment and things like that. So I think that what comes out of this is people start to realize, like, wait a minute, this wasn't the right way to go about society. Like, the structure was broken. And that's why people are like ignoring the celebrities singing "We Are the World" in a world, like a concert, and they're listening to Anthony Fauci. Is that his name?
Yeah, Fauci.
And like, he's like the new model influencer. Like, everyone's listening to everything he's saying. And it's like, I think that is something really powerful for everyone right now. It's like, this is when science can come in and bridge the gap that business and corporations have been fooling people on all along. It's like, and I can say this because from the advertising agency perspective, it's like, everyone's worried about that. People are like, oh no, what if this is the time when clients pull back all their spend because the system is broken? And like, we have been running on that broken system for so long, and like almost like tricking people. I don't know. I shouldn't get so negative.
I mean, the scientific community right now is mobilized in like worldwide in a way that it's never been before, which is pretty extraordinary. And the other thing that I'm thinking of as you're speaking is like this idea of, you mentioned General Motors retooling to make ventilators. The idea that our sort of measures of successes are all wrong. That a company like General Motors could be actually working for the common good is pretty extraordinary. To think that like our companies could actually not be motivated by bottom line, but could be motivated by like common good values and goals, that's pretty extraordinary.
Well, and regardless of an individual's perspective on whether that good is good enough, in a lot of ways, I think, companies may be pretty nimble, but people don't always change very quickly unless there's a shock to the system.
Yes.
So I keep going back to like Heather Rosenberg's work on resilience. She's now with Arup. And, she talks a lot about who's on the team and who's not on the team is just as valuable and has just as much impact. And so I think about that in terms of any project I'm working on or any program that I'm being asked to champion, and thinking about how does this small piece have the potential to affect someone's behavior, affect culture in the long run. And just the other day, I'm walking here on the dock, and I see people, hey, from a distance, and they're talking about how lovely it was to not have, the phone and the alarm clock, on them so persistently as would normally be. And I said, the nice thing, if I kind of try to find the silver lining in things. And I said, the nice thing about this time that's been enforced upon us is we can choose which things to bring back into our lives after this period. We don't have to bring it all back. Imagine what choices people will make. And so I think this is a unique opportunity to raise awareness about that. There are a lot of conscious choices. There are a lot of options from the individual to the corporate level. To be in conversations right now about Earth Day where people are saying, I don't know what's appropriate to do.
Right.
People don't want to be perceived in a negative light when that wasn't their intention. So I think marketing is key. People who have those kind of communication, message honing skills have, I think, an unbelievable opportunity right now to craft message that we haven't seen in decades. And that organizations, businesses, agencies that have been tough to get your toe in the door are more open to it now, I think, than ever before, because they're worried about doing the wrong thing.
Hmm.
So I mean, like, I look at what you're doing at Rewilder as a small piece of a much larger a movement, a much larger opportunity. I mean, it came from a passion, and with each piece that you do, it is a message, and each piece that you touch, it is a reminder of where it came from. The messaging on the product is so important, and so now it's like, okay, how can we tell the story about what this can do to highlight the positives that we are seeing and want to maximize? How can we take it to the next level, to the next scope? I mean, whether we're talking about Rewilder as a business or Rewilder as a piece of something larger.
Yeah, and that's definitely something Jenny and I actually talked about earlier today, is like, what is our brand purpose right now? Like, it's not to sell more stuff, but the thing is, it's like something that we've always tried to really have be our values, is like, we're not a part of the regular consumption cycle. It's like, same with David, like, we are not making new things from new virgin materials. We're like literally taking what other people have thrown away and trying to recirculate that material and like bring its life back, essentially. So it's like a lot of brands right now do need to change their purpose and their values, but I don't think that we need to, because ours has always been the same. And I think right now it's probably stronger than ever before, because people realize that that's what we need to do.
So now that's a time that you can elevate that language. I mean, even when because we did this little pilot project, which I can't wait to get the pictures. But I was telling the team today that when we finally are able to distribute, what you guys made for us, that the boxes can come back to you. And they're like, what? I said, yeah, absolutely. And all of a sudden there was like this.
Yes, please. Because when I need boxes for things, I'm literally dumpster diving. So that would be great.
Yeah,
I mean,
so,
just I guess adding, I mean, one thing we've certainly been thinking about is like, how do we humanize these issues? Like, it's especially like, I mean, we're stuck in the recycling world, but even just in general, like what's happening in the environment and carbon, like it's kind of like I think what the virus is showing us is that people are so impacted because there's this personal threat of, you can go out and catch this foreign virus that we don't have a lot of details on. And that is really like a kind of earth shattering situation for a lot of people. And, I think coming off of that, if selfishly there's a way to tie in the environment, which I think we can all agree is no doubt tied, it's an underlying cause of why we have this problem in the first place, but even just humanizing, the impacts and some of the positives coming out of this crisis, for people to understand that, okay, air pollutants are a problem because I want my lungs to be in good shape, or I want to be in good health, and I want to be more engaged with how I can contribute to cleaner air. I know on our side, we're interested in how, you disseminate information to consumers about what is the impact of the products they purchase. And a lot of consumers don't knowingly buy a product or support a company that doesn't have the right environmental practices. But if they were educated and they knew that, hey, my spend and every dollar that I put into the market has an impact on these companies, not to say that the consumers themselves could shift GM and other major manufacturers into doing everything sustainable, but certainly if you have pressure from the government, you disseminate information and you're able to educate the consumers and allow them to feel like they're empowered to contribute to the solutions. And I think there's a movement there that no doubt has been started and arguably is stumbled a bit in the current environment, and that a lot of programs are getting knocked back at the current time. But I think that this also, we're learning a lot psychologically in the way that consumers respond to crisis. And I think just framing, the realities of what's happening in the world and packaging that up and bringing some impacts that can be felt more locally and helping people want to contribute to how do I support more responsible. I mean, even if at the end of this, companies decide that one day a week everyone doesn't have to drive into the office because we've been able to get a lot done from remote, I think that'll have a big impact locally. And if beyond that, consumers change the way they buy food and other products because they want to play a bigger role, then I think we're all going to learn something valuable from it.
You remember the '84 Olympics? Were any of you guys around? Or am I just the only old fart?
I mean, I was alive, but not in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So the '84 Olympics here in Los Angeles, that was the first time that we had we staggered work schedules. It was this giant citywide mayor-driven effort to reduce traffic around LA so people could get to the Olympic events. And it was like this huge media campaign to encourage businesses. How could they do this and how would they make it work? And at the end of those 2 weeks, it was so wonderful that a lot of companies didn't go back.
Yeah.
Those
are, and they probably track like some of the stats around that. I did want to kind of talk a little bit about what you mentioned, David, and I think basically what Rewilder and Bureo has for us, that's exactly, I think, what we're trying to do on our consumer platform, which is to highlight those businesses and our companies, and primarily a lot of them are small to medium, and show their positive impact so that consumers understand directly. And I do think like that's definitely one way of educating in a very positive format, because I do feel like, and well, right now it does change things, but prior to this, I think a lot of people felt guilty and didn't want to move forward. But I think if we focus on like what some of you are saying, which is like those positive benefits of shifting, and it feels very direct, and it feels like you can see what those impact is, then people are willing to change. What oftentimes I hear is from people who are like, oh, I didn't even know that you could do this. I didn't know about this business or company or brand and what they're doing. And so one of the things in terms of our consumer facing platforms, we really try to highlight the companies that are doing a fantastic job, right? We actually develop an assessment criteria and rank companies by how sustainable they are, which is very different than a sustainable life cycle assessment. It's very much on what the activities are being achieved by a company and tracking those positive impact activities versus looking internally as a business. What are my sustainable operations and where can I, improve in terms of energy efficiency or water efficiency? Because I think for what we found in terms of kind of looking at some of the marketing information and consumers is that even though they like hearing that companies like corporate social responsibility, maybe they like hearing that, oh yeah, that company has reduced their water use by 25%. It's not going to move them to buy from them. But what may move them to buy from them is they find out that this business diverted 100 tons of trash, right? Like, actually, David, I know about your company. We randomly found it when we were looking around for businesses that are in the circular economy. And I would tell people, like, have you heard about a company that actually change it? One of the things that you guys do, which is like turn fish netting into skateboards or things. And they're like, that's so awesome. Where can I find out about them? And I think, or I often talk about Rewilder because I actually have many of her Rewilder products, and I'm often showing it when I tell people like, oh, did you know that you can buy this plastic, this backpack, and this is what it means? And almost every single time, I think people's response is, I want it. And I think that's the story, maybe Stacey, you're talking about. What I find the gap for a lot of consumers is they don't know where to go.
And also, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh,
we're trying to get that effort out, but definitely I think we need lots of help too. Like, that's why I said this kind of concerted effort of all the different pieces. But go ahead, Jen.
Well, I was going to say one of the big hurdles that from what I see is from consumers is that the price point, right? So I think there's not been, people don't associate, I mean, I don't think $120 is a lot for a backpack, but I see what it takes to make it. So I think one of the things that I've been like seeing and feeling here during this crisis time is that all of a sudden people are valuing labor in a way that we haven't before, and maybe that will change that. Like it's always at Rewilder, it's always been, why is it so expensive? Why is it so expensive? We say, oh well, if you're gonna pay for the thing that you're getting, like if you're paying a true cost, you want to come and visit where we're making this and see the people that are doing this and the work it takes to do it and the environmental cost. And you know, if you're actually paying the true cost of making something, this is what it costs in America. And I think now when you see across the board, like migrant workers are essential workers right now, and grocery clerks are essential workers right now. And I'm feeling a little bit like maybe people are valuing people more than they have in the past. And part of the conversation or part of the education might be around the true cost of making things. When you make something for 25 cents, we did a project last year with Disney, and I remember walking into the Disney store just like evaluating the product that they were sort of asking me to compete with, and they had like a totally tricked out backpack in there for like $18 or $19, like for retail. And I was like, okay, so this is not at all viable in any way for the environment, for people, for our well-being. Like this is badness. And I don't know, it seems like hearing you talk about that, and like when people are really excited about Rewilder, no doubt I get, like whenever I talk about it, whenever people are saying like, oh, that's so cool what you're doing, and then, oh, but it's really expensive.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's interesting though. I think it comes back to maybe something both Stephanie and Stacey said, which is the story, because I always add in there the price when I tell the story. I always say like, it's $100. I said, but she has the people working in her factory here in Los Angeles. And then the response is, oh, okay, well, that's different. And I think it's getting that information out, because especially now, like, oh, if you tell someone like, oh, did you know that, especially with like, fast fashion being one way where people are understanding like, the negatives of bad labor or paying people not a living wage. Maybe that's helping also that conversation. But it does, it's like what you're saying, included that story, the whole picture, which we don't get. We don't get the whole picture. We just get the unit of good.
And I would just add, this is the cynical view, but I would agree. It's something that we've seen the whole time we've been in business, is that people like the human element side. If you can show that you operate a sustainable supply chain and you're not reliant on sort of unfair wages or waste picking, at least in our space, that's a contentious point. Like if you can provide fair labor and show that you better the lives of people in your supply chain, people really respond to that. And I think there's some great brands who have some examples for that. I guess flipping it on its end, and maybe this is an opportunity to bring awareness to the things that are wrong with the world, is that I feel like the big corporates, your Amazons, your petrochemical companies, like you just start naming all of them, the way they're able to deliver product at such a cheap price is because they really do take advantage of marginalized communities. And, in our space, that would be, obviously knowing, this unfair kind of benchmark of like a new plastic price. We know that it doesn't take into account the impact of making that plastic on all the areas, the impact on the environment, the impact for finding an end of life. The fashion was mentioned, the true cost of fashion. You'll find cheap clothing that doesn't take into account fair wages or good living conditions. And so, I think it's great news that consumers are recognizing small companies and wanting to support people doing the right thing. And maybe it's just, as a society, bringing more awareness to some of the negative things that are happening and why it is better even at a higher cost to support these initiatives, because the cards are really stacked against all of us. I'm sure I'm feeling bitter about even just watching. I'm pretty close to the financial bailouts and what's happening here, and I think even with good intentions from both sides of our political parties, we're failing at actually finding the people that really need support. And I think that's probably true across big industry, where unfortunately big business typically has won in the past, and they're still really winning. And underserved communities and certainly laborers, finish last. And I see that happening now as well through the crisis, where big businesses are putting up their hands and asking for bailouts for irresponsible practices and high wages and years of being profitable and not preparing for a downturn. Whereas you have a significant portion of people who aren't even able to apply for unemployment. Maybe they don't qualify for the stimulus. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, I think as a society, we have to stay together and ask for change, because I don't think we're going to get it directly from the top. And certainly we're kind of the only ones looking out for ourselves. Everyone else is kind of working against us. So my 2 cents.
We're certainly not going to get it from the top right now.
No.
No.
No, definitely not.
So, I'm sorry to interject. Unfortunately, I have to run to a 4:00 meeting. But if in the last few minutes that I have available, if there's anything that I can do, to support this brainstorming and kind of where you want to take it, I hope that you'll keep me, in the loop. And and I'm really excited about the energy here and the possibilities. Jenny brought together a really cool group of people I can't wait to get to know better. And just, I don't know, David, we gotta help you stay on the positive.
Yeah. I think there are positives at the end of it. I just think that it's finding
you gotta
a way.
take it in so you can process it.
Power to the people. I think for me, it's like finally grassroots. I always think this, EPA was established in 1970, which previous to Homeland Security was like the last agency created, but it was purely created because the people demanded it under Nixon. And I feel like we're at that turn where we have to get people to be aware and to demand different things. It's just that everybody actually has power. They just don't realize it. And their power is in what they choose. I think, as you said, Stacey, like their choice matters.
Yeah. And it's
Stacey, do you want to leave us with something? I was going to ask what's something you want to hold on to from this moment that you want to take with you into the future.
I am struck almost daily with the quality of conversation has definitely deepened and improved in my world, and that's definitely something that I want to continue. I think this time right now has given me an opportunity to reprioritize and reflect, and kind of in the mindset of what we're doing with Rewilder's work. I live in a relatively small space, and I'm going one cabinet at a time, emptying it out and choosing what to put back in, and then what to do with what's left. And I have empty cabinets in my life. I'm so excited and loving it. And so, I think that one of those things to hold on to is I treasure who and what is in my life and get rid of the extraneous so that there's room for what's next. Yeah. So that's where I'm at. So, but please, let's keep in touch through this and other means, and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Stacey.
Good to meet you. Thanks, Stacey.
Good to meet you, Stacey.
So great to meet you. Take care.
Thanks. Cindy, can I ask you a question about when you said the EPA was created because the people demanded it? How do people go about demanding the creation of a government agency? Like, what does that look like
So
I feel like we march. Like I'm an avid marcher. I cart my 3 kids out to the street anytime I can with signs that we make on old pizza boxes. Actually, the last march we went with Imogen too. I mean, but it doesn't feel, I do that because
yeah.
it's part of the conscious, I want to be a part of that part of society.
I think it didn't happen overnight. I mean, it really happened because, I mean, I think Love Canal was the pivotal point. I mean, the U.S. had dumped all the time and hazardous waste. That's some of that is still happening. And I think what happened is a small organization, small group of people started talking about it. And I think, David, you mentioned like talking about the negatives and talking about alternatives. And the truth is, before US EPA, there were components of the agency all in different departments. But it felt like it was never, kind of focused. So what they had done is really just as a means for Congress and the administration to respond to people's like, not just marching, and it was a different time than it is today, obviously, but it was a lot of the constant, the advocacy, I think, David, you're talking about, but the voices by the people demanding different things constantly. And I think awareness of like, oh, I didn't know that could affect my reproductive, future, or that it would mean that I would get sick. And that is, and it was so bad. And part of it is it was so bad. And for me, I always felt like, well, until things get so bad, we're not going to have another shift. Yep. And I think that's the thing is what's pretty bad now. I mean, not, as you say, I do think it's all linked to the environment in some way because we're all in an ecosystem. So I think that's the thing is, how do we get our voices heard more, where it's not just talking about the negatives, but to talk about, what the bad is, but here's the alternative we have. Like it has to be that immediate jump so that people can recognize their own, the solution. I didn't realize I had the power to improve beyond just marching. I felt like at that time it's hard because back then it seemed like, I don't know, but that, demonstrations were a thing. Now I don't know that that's a thing, even though some of us do it. But if you look at Women's March, we've done that 3 years, and I don't know that it parlay necessarily into any action because we probably didn't get enough people to do something. And I do think the marketing and advertising is a really critical component because that's the education. The miss by the government is we don't have public education. That's like, at least in EPA, that budget has been cut like 10 years ago. So there is no public education at all. So how does anyone know what the impact is? So for me, I feel like here's an opportunity for us to say, here are these other options. Here's what the impact could be for you. Here was a negative impact, do this other thing. And so it seems very big because it is, but I think that's why the way I think about it is if we can get more and more people involved and say the same thing in the same way, then that will hopefully trigger something different.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just hearing you talk, like if I had to summarize what I was trying to say before, like this is an example, like, so the government obviously enacted the stimulus, and it's funny you mentioned education. I actually, like, one of the first things reading through that is I was thinking about, obviously the healthcare workers and the healthcare system was strained and they weren't considered a priority within there. It was kind of an afterthought. I thought education system, like all of the, anyone affluent probably would have access to resources. Their parents could pay for online education, they'd have computers, they'd have internet, but certainly marginalized communities, like the education system is just gone. So I felt like that was a big missed opportunity for the government to do anything about it, and people not really having a voice for that. And then looking at, like you're saying, how people can band together and make change. And looking at combating big industry. I mean, I think there's some historical examples of that, but even if we look at the impact of our isolations right now, I mean, effectively by none of us driving as much, we're harming the fossil fuel industry like dramatically right now, and probably will do some benefits for the environment. And so if people can can realize, can take advantage of that. And we can market that, hey, by all of us not driving as much for 2 months just in the US, we actually successfully, you know, removed so much capital spend from infrastructure for oil and gas. We saved this much emissions. We contributed to cleaner air. Like, I think making people feel empowered by their actions would be a positive, as opposed to my cynical view of just looking at the cards are stacked against us and this is all very negative, you know. So
I think,
yeah, go ahead, Steph.
Unfortunately, in marketing, awareness is only half of the equation, because it's literally just awareness and then conversion. And conversion is where we're talking about action, right? It's like people can know about everything. They can know about Rewilder, but what is actually going to make them do something about it? In a business sense, it's like, what's going to make the consumer buy our backpack? But like, that is a disconnect with a lot of like the stats, like the scientific stuff. It's like, we can tell them how many emissions we're saving by not driving, but it's like, what is that? How does that emotionally resonate with the people that are listening? They're just going to hear it and be like, oh, that's cool, but what does that mean to me? So like, a lot of my job here with Rewilder is to really not just quantify what is happening, but like what it means to people. And that's essentially what marketing and advertising is. It's like convincing people emotionally why something matters to them. And that's how we're able to sell bullshit things to so many people for so long.
That's why I always say the whole description of a carbon footprint has not been successful, because in the 20 plus years we've used the term carbon footprint. Currently, until recently, carbon emissions is the highest ever globally. Because we never, what we did, at least in the agencies and government or even scientists, is we say like, hey, reduce your carbon footprint. But as a consumer, a user, I'm like, I know that's a good thing, but I don't know, I really need to drive to school. I really need to drive to work. And so it took me a long time to understand this myself, but I realized in trying to convince my own family and friends that instead, if I said, you know, if you carpool 1 day a week or stop driving 1 day a week, you could actually positively affect and reduce, you know, asthma rates in children in the US. And that's when people are like, oh, wait, how's that connected? And I'm like, well, did you know that your car actually has emissions and blah, 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 blah. And then they're more interested. But I think that's the part, I think, Stephanie, you're talking about is the conversion. Is all we've been doing, is talk about awareness, but we've never made that emotional, you know, kind of pulling your heartstrings to make you do something different.
Well, that's
which I think is hard.
That's where this moment is so full of intensity, right? It's like you're talking about, like you said, Cindy, you're like, I don't think people will change unless there's a crisis. And now there's a major fucking crisis. And that your health has to be tied to climate, because it is. I mean, I've read 50 articles that are basically like climate. First of all, the climate is way better. So like all of the statistics that we're seeing, when I walk outside in Los Angeles, I can feel it.
You can smell it.
I can smell it. I can see it. It looks like my windows have been cleaned. Like I went through the car wash or something. Like it's literally like I can see the sky's a different color. And then also I feel it.
Yeah, I think there was a New York Times article yesterday or today. I didn't read the whole article.
There was.
Linking just the pollution levels with the kind of detrimental impacts of the virus as well.
Yeah, exactly. So then if you start to talk about what's your personal connection to climate change, it's like it's here. It landed in our, like it just like landed on the earth, right? Like we're all personally connected to climate change. I don't know, that's interesting to hear you talk about like your emissions as it relates to childhood rates of asthma. That's like, that like pierces my heart immediately.
Well, that is what, and I don't know if you guys have been following this. One of the things that I have seen is that people who, you know, we hear about underlying conditions, but some of the critical underlying conditions that we should really focus on too, particularly in the US, it's younger people, right? Like under 60 have been affected. And some of those are people with asthma. So it's because this particular virus really tries to go towards your lungs first. So if you already have that underlying condition of your asthma, or maybe you don't have asthma that you know about, but you live in a highly dense, high emissions area, your lungs are probably affected. And so you kind of go about your day, but you didn't even know that maybe your lung capacity is only at 75%.
Yep.
Yeah, and another thing is also linked to obesity.
Yes.
A lot of the
Yes.
hospitalizations are obesity, so a lot of the conversations around big food industry stuff is
Yeah.
like what is their role?
Diabetes too. Yeah.
Diabetes.
They're harvesting the earth in like the agro-industrial complex. Like everything, it's bad for emissions, it's bad for the soil, it's bad for the people that are literally there picking the food. And like this is the like it's causing obesity in America among children, young adults, older, like everyone. And like this virus disproportionately affects those people that aren't able to access healthy foods. So it's like all fucked in that regard.
Yeah, and I think shifting the conversation from the environment being like aligned with the political party and aspirations and more just like your human health. Like I know, I don't know the study and I've gotten it secondhand, but I know that in fighting the tobacco industry against young adults smoking, one of the big ways that they went about that in the 90s and in 2000s was basically telling students that they were being lied to and that these cigarettes were not safe. The companies were touting them to them, but they were just tricking them into getting lung cancer basically. And so like exposing the issue and saying that like you should take responsibility on your own health because this company basically is not thinking of you in their best interest. I think that's powerful and letting people feel like they have a better control over, their kind of the detrimental impacts that they experience from their human health, as opposed to, no, the environment's just something that hippies are worried about and like it doesn't really affect
exactly. Tree huggers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it has to be linked to human health. I feel like we miss that as tree huggers somehow. We miss that whole we kept talking about that and then we thought it would work, but it doesn't. I mean, this is a conversation I have my own friends and colleagues like who are staunch environmentalists and they're still talking about like, no, we just have to explain it. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I worked with public workshops for like years and explaining more does not work. It's, it's like that's environment, but just look at politics, right? Like it's not like being logical about it and let me show you a gazillion data that's going to help. It's about that human connection. It's about what's going to make me worry or care about me. At the end of the day, we all care about our health. That's the one thing I can count on, is that you will care about your health or your family's health. So if we can somehow couch all of the discussion into our health, I think we would do much better.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I have to jump, everyone, but it's been great. A great discussion.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Do you want to leave us with something that you want to hold on to from this moment?
I think just slowing down and being able to look around us and, maybe not having to go back up to speed the way we were operating. I think maybe it wasn't sustainable to try to answer every email and fly every destination that came across our plate, but just trying to take a little life more as it comes to you a little bit more than kind of rushing every day. And I think doesn't mean we're all not being productive, but I think everyone's environment has certainly changed in that respect in the last few weeks. So try to hold on to that as much as I can.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah, we were talking about on the last call just measuring success differently. Like you woke up in the morning and you're alive and you're breathing and you have a roof and food, and that's a successful day.
Yeah, I like it. Well, nice to meet everyone. Looking forward.
You too.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
David.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.
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 Whoa, now we're just the four of us.
Yeah, I have about 5 minutes.
Okay, you're fine. You want to leave us with something that you want to hold on to from Cindy? I love talking to you.
I can. I'm also happy to stick around to just chat a teeny bit about like next steps if you want, Jenny.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. I think, this is the second call and they've both been pretty fascinating. It's hard to, it's hard to kind of set goals right now, but I think it's important.
Yeah,
You know,
it
it's
is.
I think it's hard to set goals when you don't know where you're standing because
yeah.
everything's changing. It's like it's moving so fast, you're moving so fast, everything around is. So then it's like you have to set a goal when you know where you're coming from and how to get there, right?
Yeah, I think, Cindy, to share with you some of the things that Stephanie and I were talking about this morning about just how do we deal with this moment as a company, we've been talking about just trying to be really transparent that we're about where we're at, and also just Stephanie was sort of starting to brainstorm on sort of these small tidbits that are basically talk about the complications of this time, rethinking the way people consume, you know, that we don't feel totally comfortable selling you things right now that you don't need. So
Yeah.
I mean, kind of just really being as honest as we possibly can on our social media to just talk. I don't know, that's sort of what in terms of setting goals, but for this conversation specifically, I don't know, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, are you asking me?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to hear your thoughts now that it's over.
I mean, for me, I think I always feel, I mean, I appreciate the slowdown. I think that's so important because that's something we all need, just kind of both individually and, you know, as a group. I love that you started this. I'd love for us to come out of this where it's not just new connections but we can create, I don't know what you want to call it, like a collaborative work group of like-minded people who are trying, we have this overarching mission, whether that mission is to tell the story transparently and differently, or, you know, getting groups of, whether it doesn't have to be business, but businesses, organizations, nonprofits that are creating that partnership. Because for me, I think that's the only way to be as big as a corporation, right? Like when I think about, you know, oftentimes people will come to me and say, that's cool that you do that, but there's already CSR, corporate social responsibility. Like, what do you think about that? And I'm like, well, that's great for the 500 or 1,000 corporations they're doing it, but there's 18 million businesses in the United States, right? So I think that in order for us to really have a loud enough voice, we have to create groups. We have to create groups that we can, you know, kind of push the same messaging. If that messaging is for whatever it is. So for me, that's what I would love to come see at a distance. You pull different people together, and it's primarily like LA or SoCal.
Yeah.
By the way, Bay Area, I lived in Bay Area and worked in Bay Area. They're much better at this than we are in the Southern California.
The
We
talking
can't
about
seem
it
to
or
get
the
the
grouping, making the groups or talking about this stuff.
Probably both, actually. Definitely the grouping. Like I think, like when I think about Bay Area, it's like there is a, you know, collaborative organization or work group, whether it's you know, private or nonprofit sector, and they're trying to band together and achieve something or do something, or just even be heard, or even, you know, push policy in a different way. Maybe for me, what I'm trying to show is like the model works, right? Here are all the businesses who are achieving triple bottom line, and it works. You can make a profit, you can also help the planet, and you can treat people better, right? Those things actually work. So the problem though is, even though I say that and I see many examples, the problem is people don't realize that, and they don't see it, and they don't see that working. So for me, I think if we're going to really topple a corporation, or at least be as strong as one, then we have to ban all the different organizations together. And I'd love to see something in Southern California, or even just LA or whatever, that you can kind of say, we get together and we're all going to say the same message. That's one example. Uh-oh, did I freeze?
Just for a second, but your audio didn't ever stop.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's an extraordinary idea. Like, I love when you said, if you want to topple a corporation, you gotta band together. I love that. I mean, yeah. Okay.
think that
Anyway,
goes along with what we've been talking about. It's like you want to build this community and use this time to build a community. That's what these talks are for.
Yeah.
I think what we're having a little bit of difficulties with is figuring out what we do in terms of actual like micro steps on like how do we get to the goals that we're all aligned on. It's like we all want to see the same thing in the far future, but how do we get there, and how do we like bridge the now and all these people to get there together? And that's something like when we're talking about how hard it is to set goals, like this is part of it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I would say, yeah. And I mean, I think, Stephanie, you said something that really resonated with me, right, about marketing and advertisement, which I think that when you're a small to medium-sized business, you don't actually have the resources to hire the big marketing, right, and advertising firms. So you're trying your best. Now, social media has helped them democratize that a teeny bit, but still, it's really hard, right? So I mean, for me, I feel like if all we did was get banded together, you know, kind of sustainable businesses that are not corporations, that are small to medium size, and that it's like showing that it matters, and here are the things that we're doing. We are both, you know, offering a product that you use every single day. We're treating our, you know, workers fairly. We're being sustainable as a core, like, and those are big, lofty missions that I don't know that any of these, what we're calling social responsible business or conscious business, would disagree with, right? So, I mean, I think, and so could we band together and send the same message? Imagine like if you got, I don't know, 500 businesses in Southern California, and we're all sending the same message out, right, on the same day or the same week.
Intersharing with each other.
Yes, and where exactly social media sharing with each other, like that's the only way, because me doing it by myself, or you, Rewilder doing it by themselves, or Bureo, or any other, I mean, there's so many, it's like, it's really hard to get airtime. But if we're all sending the same message, maybe we can, that's when the consumers are like, oh, wait, what's that? And what I hear, I don't know, I'm not a marketing and advertising person, but what I hear from other people tell me is like, for an average person, they have to see a message between 7 to 9 times before they'll convert to even consider to thinking they're doing something different. Right?
Yeah.
So anyways.
I think there's something powerful in that, and I really like the idea of some sort of coalition, because I think most of the coalitions that we see for like sustainability and ethical manufacturing, like the whole purpose of it is still to sell you something.
Yeah.
And I almost think that there's something more powerful in doing that support, like that, where the whole purpose is not necessarily to sell you something. It's like, yes,
right,
you have products to sell, but what we're really trying to do is form a stronger way of doing business and rebuilding the structure of like business for the future coming out of this pandemic.
And
right.
make people understand that their health is directly tied to climate change, or that their health is directly tied to the health of the planet.
Yes, their health. And
Your
it could just
health
be
is
about
directly tied to the health of the planet.
It's true. But and also here's the other thing I think lots of people don't know is all the amazing things small businesses are doing. Just because they're like, I know it's a good thing to do, I'm going to do it, right? It's like Rewilder, like, I don't know that I can afford it, but I really care about it, and I'm going to do it anyways. And so you chip away at your bottom. Yeah, you chip away your bottom line, and I see that, like, we've assessed, 1,200 businesses, and you see that over and over again, and yet I'm probably one of the like few people in the world who's seen that, and yet somehow I always think if just everybody knew like the personality of these businesses, like you mentioned transparency, but really doing it without selling, like you just know, like, and this is the thing that you're talking about, I think, about marketing and advertising. It's like, sure, you have a product, but then you're trying to figure out all these ways to try to sell you the good, but it's about the brand or the personality. And so, like, could we try to figure out this coalition of whatever businesses or organizations, like what that personality is, and have it be clear for a consumer, and then they're like, oh, definitely I'm not going to go buy it from Amazon now because I didn't know I had a choice. I didn't know there was an alternative. So anyways.
Definitely food for thought. I'll
Yeah.
have a brainstorm on that.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Cindy.
oh yeah.
It's always such a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And
I've just heard about you for so long.
I know.
oh, yeah, thank you. I know. I love everything. I love Rewilder. Tell everybody about it. By the way, my work bag is a Rewilder bag as an opportunity for me to sell, by the way. But same thing with Bureo. Like, I think that's what, to be honest, that's what gets me going. Otherwise, I can be, when I think about the real information and data. But I know that all of this exists, and I just feel like, what is the best way for us to get it out? You know. So. Thank you.
I was excited to hear that they're working on a higher, like a corporate level. I mean, it's interesting, right, Stephanie? You think like, we talk about this all the time too. Like, do we really want to be selling consumer goods when you're so mission driven? Do you really want to be selling consumer goods, or do you want to be working at a higher level with bigger companies?
Like, consumer is where the power is. It's like the reason why corporations are struggling right now, retail, why
Yes.
laid off all of their people today is because consumers hold the power. So we do have to,
yes.
and this isn't just from a marketing advertising perspective, but like consumer collectively, not an individual person, but like when you can sell to people, that is how you get noticed. So that's why it's always been important for me to keep doing the consumer side, because I think that every single company and corporation, big and small, is beholden to the consumer.
Yes, totally. And I think you're right. You're right on point with that, is that, but I think as consumers, like every single one of us, I think we forgot about that. We forgot about the power that we hold. Because I hear this, I hear from some of my friends who are like, they don't always hold back. They're like, Cindy, this whole thing with like the stupid straws, like, what's the deal? It's just one straw, right? And I'm like, times 300 million every single day, And they're like, oh, well, I mean, it's just such a bother. And I feel like we get so focused on convenience.
Yep. Cost and convenience, number one.
Yes.
Well, I think when you're talking about that, what's coming to my mind of something that I'd like to hold on to from this time is this idea of like people really seeing people more, and maybe that helps. Like when you talk about tying your health to climate change, and tying how products are made with the people that actually make them, and just like the humanity of the whole process. I don't know. There's something in that I want to explore and hold on to.
I think so. And I think people are looking for it. It's just, I struggle too, for sure. Like, okay, well, I know here's a moment. How do we capitalize on the moment, right? Ultimately, that's why we're having these conversations. It's like, clearly we're at a moment that we're never going to get back again. So how can we take and capitalize on this moment to push it in the way that we all believe it should be pushed? And I don't have an answer for that. But I definitely feel the same way you do. And I do, one of the answer is that human connection. Because in some ways, look what's happening. We're like, because we're all afraid of a virus, we literally force ourselves to be at home. We won't drive, because that, by the way, that rationale before never worked. It's almost like I always hear like, oh, but you know what, how am I supposed to do it, Cindy? I have to drive to work. I have to go to school. Like, so I think like, but we did it to ourselves. We made ourselves stay at home. So something about that human connection, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm so
time.
grateful. Yeah, I have to go. I'll leave one thing. I'm grateful for the people I've met. People like you, Jenny and all Stephanie. You thinking about this, coming from science major to marketing. Stay in it, by the way, because it is so critical. I used to say, like, if EPA just spent 70% of their budget on advertising and marketing, we wouldn't need laws. So I'm just grateful to have these conversations and meet people. I know that, like, finally I feel like we're at that moment. It's just, I feel like I've been waiting for it. So.
Yeah. And I do want to somehow leverage the power of the ad agency for purpose-driven things like this. And we are starting to do that. But I think I want to figure out how I would best present that, because I think that big ad agency has a lot of power to make the change, and everyone's asking for it right now. So maybe that could be a separate conversation of like, how do my mentor is actually the CFO, and he would be willing to do something like this if it meant making a difference, I think. So
making a difference, right, to business too.
Business and people, because this pandemic has really turned the world upside down to where we don't know what's what anymore. So like now is the moment for us to be talking, but also for people, the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, to be talking. It's like everyone's having a conversation right now, and it's all going to be for a different future. So I think there's power in that.
Wouldn't it be extraordinary if your entire agency shifted over to this kind of marketing?
I mean, we just hired a chief purpose officer, so
that's cool.
Yeah,
definitely. Well,
great,
let me know, and thank you, and I'll be hopefully chatting with you soon.
Yes, you will. Thank you.
Bye. Great to meet you guys.
Bye.